Okay, so this video is going to be all about paint. There's quite a lot to cover, so this video will probably end up quite long, but hopefully you'll hang in there. So just firstly, this here is a bucket of paint. It will spawn in a random location out of a list of predefined ones somewhere in each world, excluding the Developer Island Easter egg and the free Messenger Islands. I'll get onto that a bit more later though. The intended use of paint is just to find it somewhere and come up to a wall like this and paint a message. This message will then leave a QR, which your Steam friends will then be able to see once they start a new game. Now, as an example, up there I have one from Psychomania. But as speedrunners, we've come up with another use for paint, and that is that we can use it to item jump. These item jumps go higher than both regular item jumps and perfect item jumps, so that's quite useful. When you combine that with the fact that we can take paint through purple barriers like this, it ends up being a lot more versatile and we use it a bit more. Okay, but now for something interesting. If I start a new game and look at all of the possible paint spawns in A1, first one being here. Oh no, I should make sure I'm just using cheats here to speed this up a bit. Next paint spawn would be here, but it's not there. Cheats don't affect this at all, this happens normally too. And last paint spawn's here. Paint just hasn't spawned. This is because paint only actually spawns when you have 5 of those messages, 5 paint lines unlocked. Now there are a number of different paint lines, and they're always routed into any run that uses them, so you don't need to worry too much. But I want to talk to you about 3 in particular. Okay, so these 3 paint lines are awarded for 1. Reading all of the terminal documents. 2. Reading 83 QRs, not including ones from your friends, and yes, that's a weird arbitrary number, I know. Or 3. Reading all audio logs, well, listening to rather. So these might seem a bit weird, because like, don't you need to go through every terminal in the entire game, sitting through this slow text here to get that paint line? And yes, you're right, normally. Turns out there's a useful glitch in the game. The variables it uses to keep track of how many QRs you've read or audio logs or terminal documents, those 3 variables aren't reset when you start a new game, they're saved globally. This means that, because I've already read all of them, listened and so on, this QR, for example, counts as the last QR I need and it will just instantly award me the paint line. Same goes for the other 2. And you might ask, hey, isn't this technically New Game Plus then? And yeah, you're right, it is. We've played the game before in order to get an advantage in the run. But it's just a lot more inconvenient for us to do true any percent, and it doesn't really change the route that much. We just substitute some other quick lines. So we decided to allow this in runs. One more question you might have is, how do I tell if I've got enough of these, because I didn't pay attention in my casual playthrough and now I've started a new game and lost my backups? Well, luckily for you, getting those paint lines for the first time actually unlocks some achievements. The first one's here, QR Reader. That's obviously for reading all the QRs. Thorough Researcher is, like it says, for all of the terminal documents, and then a Good Listener is for all the audio logs. If you have the 3 achievements, you'll probably have gotten all the variables, apart from in a few edge cases, which you can just ask me about in the comments or PM me somewhere. Now, one thing I do want to quickly stress though, having the achievements does not mean you have the variables. You can't just use Steam Achievement Manager to give yourself the achievements, and then expect to be able to read a QR and instantly get the paint line for it. You do have to go through the game normally without cheating, collecting all of them and reading all of these. We don't use the terminal one much, so I have a video on how to get the QR and audio log achievements, which I'll link in the description in case you need to follow along with that. Okay, so now I want to talk about how exactly the game decides where to put paint. Firstly, if I come click over here and over here, you'll see I have no paint because I only actually have 4 paint lines right now. If I come back to spawn and read this QR though, I'll get my 5th paint line and paint spawns over here. The moment you get your 5th paint line, the game will pick a random seed, and using that seed it works out where on the map it should place your paint and which one of the sets spawns. It then actually just places your paint there instantly. Now the random seed is actually constant across all worlds, and we can use that to help predict where paint will be, but I'll get into that a bit later. For now I want to talk about how we can manipulate this random seed. we have two methods of doing this, and I've actually already done the first one without telling you. So if I come check over here again, the paint's gone. If you read a QR as your fifth paint line, you can do what we call paint minute. Basically, reading a QR doesn't give you a checkpoint, unlike all of the other paint lines. So the game never actually saves that you have the paint line, and it never saves your paint seed. So you can read a QR, check your paint spawn, and if you don't like it, just restart checkpoint and get another. Technically this works in all worlds, but A7 here is the only one where it's really practical, because you have the major spawn over there, a QR right here next to spawn, spawn's right there, they're all very close, and you can manipulate for a single set over there. Now if you do eventually get a paint spawn you like, you need to get a checkpoint to save it. The way I like doing for this is just going for a purple barrier, but based on a route you can just do something like collecting a sigil or leaving the world. But now that I've saved it by going through that purple barrier, paint will always be here. Checkpoint saves your paint seed, so it's going to stay there. And now if you do have a save paint seed like this, you can use the second method we have for manipulating them, which we call paint re-rolling. You simply come up to a wall and paint a QR. So this will overwrite any QRs you already have in the world, which isn't that nice if you like placing them in weird spots. But it re-rolls your paint seed. Oh, and the other side effects are you lose paint in the world until you start a new game, so my paint's not here anymore no matter how much I reset. It hasn't teleported over here either. And also, you lose a paint line if you do this, so you need to go get an extra one. But what this does let you do is it lets you use one paint set, which might be really good for the beginning of the run, but really bad in the end, and then just switch in between, so you hopefully don't need to deal with the bad part. Okay, so now I want to talk a bit about paint sets. CS found that on maps with 4 potential spawn points for paint will always spawn in one of these 5 sets. And most of the maps in the game actually fit this criteria, so it's rather useful. You can see every row here is a different map that it works on. But what this means is that if you noticed you had, say, this paint spawn in A5 and then this one in A6, you'd know with 100% accuracy that you had this one in A7, this one in B4, and so on down the entire list. This is of course really useful in speedruns because apart from the initial worlds, we don't need to go searching for paint in each world, and it saves a lot of time. I then later followed in his footsteps and we've worked out the same works for maps of 3 or 5 potential spawn points. But these are less useful because we have more sets here and less worlds, so it's more memorization for less payoff, basically. One more thing before I get into how exactly I found this out. I'm not 100% sure if Yost did his, but I'm guessing it's probably pretty similar. Paint sets here aren't all equally likely. In the case of the 4 potential spawn sets, set 0 and set 4 both occur 1/8 of the time, whereas the other 3 occur 1/4 of the time. As to why exactly this is, I won't get to, but along with why exactly paint spawns, Darker does a good write-up on this page of how exactly that happens and why there are different probabilities here. Similarly, in the 9 free spawn sets, we have 9 different sets, but set A, set E, and set I all happen 1/6 of the time, whereas the rest only happen 1/12. And then the last thing to point out, this doesn't happen in free spawn maps, but in the 4 spawn ones, sometimes you have stuff like this here in A7, where 4 of the sets are all a single spawn, which in this case makes this spawn occur 7/8 of the time, and this one only 1/8. So even if you don't fully know your set, say you noticed you had this spawn in A6, which could be either set 0 or set 2, you can sometimes still make a pretty good guess of what paint spawn you actually still have. Okay, now to how I worked this one out. If we go look at this script from the game files, this is paint item unlocking.lua, and it pretty obviously handles how paint unlocks. Now, again, I won't go through this function because Darker does that nice write-up on the site, but I want to look at the random seed here. So first time we encounter random seed, we're either getting it from the save file or generating it ourselves. If we're generating it, it's a random number from 0 to 8,909,478. Yes, that's a weird arbitrary number, all of this is weird and arbitrary, don't worry about it. Let me just make sure it's positive, and here comes the next interesting thing. We generate multiplier, don't worry about what that actually is, but we generate it with random seed modulus 8, which means that we didn't actually need 8 million here, it could have been much lower. For this one in particular, this could have been times 8, but for the next bit you'll see it's a bit different. Then next time we use random seed is down here to create random index, along with this function which you don't need to worry about. But then if we look at random index, when that's used it's also part of a modulus. And this one's either modulus 3, 4 or 5 depending on your world. So if we take into account both of the moduluses, we'll notice that the true value of random seed's never actually used, because you always run the modulus over. Which means that if we look at the possible values with 8 and then 3, 4 and 5, those repeat after 120, which means truly they could have made this 120 with no difference. But the other thing this does, it makes it really nice if you want to just iterate over all possible paints ones. So like I said, if you go across all worlds, you only have 120 unique sets. Not unique, 120 different sets. Unique is a different subset we'll get to in a second. But then if we look at, say, free paints format, we have mod 3 and mod 8, which this repeats after 24 sets to iterate over instead, which is a lot nicer to do. And this is how I worked out the paint sets, just brute force basically. Here are the first 24 random seeds, after which it repeats, which is what the colours symbolise by the way. And then here we have all of the 24 unique not unique again, here are the 24 different sets, and then I run an equals unique over them to get the 9 unique ones out. And then just manually check what numbers correspond to what set to work out the probabilities of all these, and then a bit of work to find out which location number corresponds to which spawn in each world, but you don't need to worry about that. And then we just have these paint sets, and Dark had made this page showing them all off. Okay, this is lagging for some reason, but I did the similar thing with Paint 5. I'll show you if it ever gets back to the page. Except for on Paint 5 I obviously did 40, because 5 and 8 repeat after 40 units instead. And that ended up giving me 25 unique sets, and because it's not too useful, we never actually finished that up. So we know there are 25 unique sets, but we don't know what locations they are. Yeah, it doesn't look like this is gonna load, unfortunately. I also have Fierce's original sheet here, which I'd love to show you, but he does something similar to me. I'm just not sure entirely how he worked it out for these 4 paint spawn worlds. Yeah, sorry, this isn't loading, should have checked beforehand. Made sure it's not using up too much RAM or something. But that's going to be it for the tutorial, and it's basically everything you need to know about Paint. If you have any more questions, you can feel free to PM me or just ask someone in the Discord. And yeah, thanks for watching.